Welcome back! In the past few lessons, we've talked about loops in JavaScript, and we focused on the for and the while loops. In this lesson, we're going to learn about a few additional keywords that we can utilize while working with loops in JavaScript. And these keywords are break, continue, and label. So we've seen the break keyword before in an earlier lesson when we were working with our switch statements. We saw how we could use break to exit out of our switch statement, so that way we stop executing our lines of code. And what's really interesting is we can use the break keyword while also working with a loop. So to get started, what we need to do is if you go into your project folder, let's go ahead and go into the 27-break and continue folder and the start subfolder. If you can go ahead and open up main.js. Then in your browser, if you can go ahead and open up the index.html page, you should go ahead and see break and continue on the page. So to see an example of our break statement, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a for loop. So let's go ahead and use our for keyword, and then we'll go ahead and have our parentheses followed by our opening and closing curlies. Then here, let's go ahead and for our first statement do let I equal 0. And then for our second statement, we'll do I less than 5. And then finally in our third statement, let's go ahead and increment I. And then inside our for loop, let's go ahead and just console.log the value of I. And we'll go ahead and save and refresh. And then what we should see is we should see this line of code executed 5 times. So we should see 0 through 4 since we started at 0 in our first statement here. So as I mentioned, we can use the break statement to also jump out of our for loop to stop executing. So for example, if right away if I add a break statement, what should happen is if we save and refresh, immediately when we start our loop, the break statement will run, and we immediately exit out of our for loop and we continue to our next line in our JavaScript code. And because we have a break statement, our console log actually never runs. If we take our break statement and place it after our console log, what we should see is we should see 0 get logged, we immediately encounter our break statement, and we exit out. So the break statement is really useful because we can add conditional statements here to break out of our for loop if some condition is met. So for example, let's say we want to exit our for loop if we have any numbers greater than 3. So what we could do is we could do if, and then we could do I is greater than 3. Then we can go ahead and call our break statement and we'll exit out of our for loop. So now if we go ahead and save and refresh, you'll see we log 0, 1, 2, and 3, and then once we hit 4, because it's greater than 3, we exit out. So the next statement we want to take a look at is the continue statement. So the continue statement is really unique because what it can allow you to do is it allows you to break an iteration of your loop and basically exit out of this continuation and continue to the next one without running any of the code that's underneath the statement. So to see an example of this, let's go ahead and copy our for loop here. And then what we'll do is we'll do if I is equal to 2, instead of doing break, let's go ahead and do continue. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, what we'll see is we start with I being set to 0, and because I does not equal 2, we go ahead and log our value. We continue to our next iteration, y 1, so this is also false, so we go ahead and log our statement, and then we get to where it's 2. And because I is equal to 2, we go ahead and call continue. What basically happens is we exit out of this current iteration, so we don't run any other lines of code after the continue statement, and we continue to the next iteration. So where break will break us out of the for loop altogether, continue only breaks us out of this current iteration. So one last statement I want to talk about is the label statement. And the label statement is really unique because it allows you to label a block of code. So a set of statements that you want to refer to, you can give them a label. And then we can use that to break out of this block of code. So the break and continue statements are the only 2 JavaScript statements that can jump out of a block of code. However, they're a little bit unique because the continue statement can only be used to skip one iteration of a loop. The break statement can only be used to jump out of a loop or a switch. However, the label statement can be used to break out of any code block anywhere in your code. So you can see that break and continue are very specific. And label allows us to be pretty flexible. So to see label in action, what we're going to do is let's write a few lines of code that we want to be executed. So first, I'm just going to do console.log hi. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and place it 3 more times. I'm going to do hello, how, and then bye. So right now, if we save and refresh our page, you'll see that we execute each of these lines of code. So we see hi, hello, how, and bye. Let's say I want to go ahead and break after these lines of code and not execute these 2 lines. So normally, we wouldn't be able to do this. However, if we use a label, we can. And so to use a label, what we do is we write the name of our label. So I'm just going to call this test label. And then after our label, we do a colon. And then we go ahead and do a curly bracket if we're going to have multiple lines of code. So then inside our curly bracket, we're going to take our console log statements here and place them inside here. So then, if we go ahead and save and refresh, what we should see is we should see our label and our lines of code should still run as before. So we still see our statements. And now, because we have this code labeled, we can go ahead and do break, and then we can place the name of our label, so test label. And now what you'll see immediately in our editor is these 2 lines of code become grayed out because they will never execute with how we have our code currently set up. So if we go ahead and save and refresh our code, you'll see right away we only have hi and hello logged. So by using labels, we can now use our break keyword inside this labeled set of code. And it's really powerful because we can use other conditionals to dictate what will actually be ran.